On behalf of the City of Independence, I welcome each of you in attendance to this meeting of the November 19th meeting of the Planning Commission. Before we begin our meeting, let's stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
For those of you who are unfamiliar with our meetings, it is the responsibility of this commission to hold public hearings and make recommendations to the Independent City Council on matters related to zoning and land use changes within our city. We also consider and make decisions on plats, special use permits, and other issues, as well as changes in codes and policies that relate to city planning. Our procedure for each case is as follows. First, the applicant will be recognized to speak on behalf of their case. Then, anyone else in attendance that wishes to speak in favor of the case. After that, those who are in opposition or who have questions regarding the case will then be recognized to speak. If there was opposition or questions from the public, the applicant will be allowed a rebuttal period to address those concerns or questions. And once the applicant is finished, the chair will declare the public hearing portion of the case closed, and further comment from the public will not be recognized. The commissioners will have the opportunity to discuss the merits of the case with one another, and during that discussion, the commission reserves the right to ask questions of all parties concerned. And then finally, the commission will render a decision in the case. Because this is the only public hearing of the cases on the agenda tonight, all those who wish to speak will be heard. All comments and questions should be addressed to the chair and not directly to either the applicant or directly to the city staff. The chair also requests that statements be kept brief and on point. If the statement has already been made by a previous speaker, please do not repeat it, but simply indicate your agreement on that matter. To expedite tonight's meeting, the chair asks that everyone who wishes to testify or who believes that they may testify, please stand now and be sworn in. Okay. Those standing, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the whole truth before this commission? If so, please answer, I do. Thank you. You may be seated. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
and as per the agenda, I'm going to make a motion to reverse the order of cases, that we would hear case number 19-175-04 after case number 19-125-03.
Okay, a motion has been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Sorry, second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, let's take a vote.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Yes.
Commissioner Preston,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiley,
Yes.
Commissioner McLean,
Yes.
Chairman Ashbaugh.
Yes. So we're going to proceed to the case number 19-125-03, rezoning preliminary development plat for 303 South Hunter Street. The city, give their report, please.
Okay, Douglas Pope requested to rezone the property at 303 South Hunter from R12 two-family residential to R18 PUD, which is medium-density residential planned unit development, and approve a preliminary development plan in order to utilize a second building on the property, which currently contains 3 now vacant dwelling units. The map you see on the screen now shows the general location of the site, which is just south of Walnut Street on South Hunter. Nolan Road is to the west, Lee Summit Road to the 291 to the east. This is the zoning for the area, with the property shown in the small red polygon. The properties in the immediate area all have been zoned R12 for many years and contain mostly single-family homes with a scattering of two-family dwellings throughout the area. This is the future land use maps, and it shows that our residential neighborhood designation for the entire area. Again, the site is in the little black polygon there in the middle of the screen. This is the aerial photograph of the site showing the property in the oval. There's single-family homes with some duplexes surrounding the property. The railroad tracks adjoin the property on the south. This is a larger aerial photograph showing the property and the surrounding, along with the property owners that received the public notice. It has the 185-foot boundary there shown around the site. This is the site plan of the property that shows the existing proposed conditions. The squarish duplex rests on the front of the lot with the triplex about 20 feet behind it. There are driveway/parking spaces on both sides of the duplex. As the applicant is not really planning any exterior or improvements to the site, this is really all there is for a site plan. Okay, we're on the west side of South Hunter, looking east into the site. Again, this is the duplex that occupies the front of the site. As you can see, it's an all brick structure. This is a photo of the southern half of the duplex, which is about 20 feet behind the duplex, the triplex, which is about 20 feet behind the duplex. As you can see, the duplex on the left and part of the parking area at the bottom where the chairs and table are. This is another photo of the triplex. This is the northern part of the building. The wall of the duplex is on the right, and there's some parking area there on the bottom. Okay, here we're looking south down Hunter Street. There's a railroad crossing just right there off in the distance. And this is the property immediately south of the site. Railroad tracks, again, separating this property from the one south of there. This is a single-family home that's southwest of the site, on the west side of Hunter, on the south of the railroad tracks as well. This single-family home is directly across the street from this site. It's a single-family home. This single-family home is to the northwest across Hunter Street. And Walnut is also just right up there in front of this house. And then this house, here we're looking, we're standing in front of the site looking due north up Hunter Street to Walnut, which is just up there at the somewhat top of the hill. And this is the house that's directly north of the site. It's not clear, but I thought from being by there that the house contains 2 dwelling units. It does have 2 meters. So I'm thinking it's probably a duplex with one entrance in the back there and another on the front. Okay, staff recommends approval of this rezoning request and the accompanying site plan, development plan with the following conditions. First is the owner must obtain a landlord license, register with the city's rental ready program, and have the buildings inspected and the necessary improvements made to bring the site into conformance with city code. These improvements relate to rotting wood, broken windows, peeling paint, and roof repair. And then number 2 is due to the configuration of the lot and its improvements, the number of dwelling units on the site may not be increased, but remain at 5 units.
Thank you. I just had a question. I don't anticipate this happening, but I got to wondering if that triplex was torn down, can it be built back into some sort of fashion?
Well, the density on the property would allow it to be rebuilt. He would have to come through the site plan process again because it's a new structure. So it would come back through this board as a preliminary development plan.
Okay, but do our current building codes allow a building like that now?
I don't really know much about the building itself.
Well, I mean, as far as how far apart they are.
Well,
the size of them have to be pretty small, really.
I think they're far, buildings generally in the residential, they have to be at least 10 feet apart. So I don't think that's an issue here.
Okay.
My guess is they would probably be built a little farther apart because they're just really too close.
But
almost.
bottom line, it has to go through a process all over
Yes.
again if they're torn down.
Yeah,
Okay.
if they burn or they're torn down, that sort of thing.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just curious. I don't mean to belabor this, but then could he also add a second story to the triplex?
Well,
Because you didn't specifically say he couldn't increase the size. You just said he couldn't increase the number.
well, it's possible if he's not increasing the number of units on the site. I can't imagine that building would ever be
Well, I can't either.
raised, but I guess it could be possible.
Well, this is how we learn things, by asking questions.
Yeah.
So, all right, thank you. Is there anyone here who has?
The applicant
the
is right
applicant?
over there.
Okay, I'm sorry. Would the applicant please come forward and state your name and address for the record? Yes,
Yeah.
sir. And when you get up there, you got to speak right into the microphone.
All right.
So,
Is there,
yeah, please state your name.
Sure.
And then your address
okay.
for the record.
My name is Doug Pope, and the address is 303 South Hunter.
Okay. Just any additional information you wanted to add to the city report, or that summed it up, or is there anything
Yeah.
you want to say? It's fine.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think Stuart covered it pretty well. Like he kind of covered it, but the units have been in use in the last. Well, it's hard to say. I bought it a few years ago, and I kind of ran into this issue where I couldn't get the utilities on, and I intended to rehab it and do some of the repairs he had mentioned, but you could tell that they had been occupied within not too long ago, so they're
Okay.
they're ready to be rehabbed.
All right. So he covered it pretty well, and then there's a couple recommendations which he read, and you're okay with doing those.
Sure. Yeah, I intended to do it. Like I said, when we started on the project, I bought it and realized we couldn't get the utilities on, and we've got a zoning issue. So then we just said, well, we're not going to spend any money. I don't know what's going to happen here. So kind of
Okay.
stopped and didn't fix the wood rot and so on.
All right. The commissioners have questions of Mr. Pope.
At the time you purchased this property, were you notified that it did not comply with code and that the rear building had been built without proper permitting and coding?
I discovered it after I purchased it, and
It was not disclosed to you,
it wasn't disclosed. No.
and you only found out after you had purchased it and when you were attempting to get utilities?
Yes, sir. Is, just out of curiosity, is there a mechanism, like I kind of felt like I'd made a mistake, and didn't do my due diligence, but, I talked to Weiskirk and Parks to help me with preparing the documents for this. He said, well, you could have asked the city clerk, and I know that now, but is there anything else, or is there any other way I could have
I think
foregone this
city
problem?
councilor might wade in. I don't think it's appropriate for this commission.
Sure. I'll ask him later. I don't want to hold up. It's okay. He's taking notes.
There was a question on whether Mr. Pope could have contacted anybody else because he didn't find out about that the house wasn't really up to code until after he purchased it. And
Read state.
yeah, I mean, was there anybody else that you know of besides the city clerk or somebody else that, like the real estate agent or the real estate company or anybody? I mean, this was Billy's suggestion that we ask you, so. Yeah.
Well, it really was just for just a learning, to not make the same mistake, in the future. So I just, prior to the purchase, it would have been a good thing for me to know. And I was just curious because you guys are in this business, to see if.
You've always got the option of talking to an attorney about something like that.
Sure.
Because something that's not disclosed like that could easily avoid any kind of contract.
Right, yeah,
So it's something to consider, but that's time, money, effort,
right,
if the way that whether it's worth it.
sure, okay.
Okay. Anybody else have anything they want to say?
So your plan is to rehab both buildings and so that you can rent them out?
That's right. The front building, it's occupied, and the people that, actually for the 2 years I've owned it, the people who were there are still there. So it's in good condition, and don't intend to make many changes to it, but yeah, that's right. For the rear triplex, we want to make it livable.
And how many rooms does each
So
unit
each,
have?
yeah, each of them, they're one bedroom, so they're not studio, but they have a true bedroom, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Yep, thank you.
Is there anyone else here who would like to speak in favor of this case? Is there anyone here who is opposed or who has questions? Okay, seeing no movement in the crowd, we'll declare the public hearing portion closed. Ask for any comments or motions from my fellow commissioners.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
in the matter of case number 19-125-03, the rezoning from R12 to family residential to R18, that's your PUD, medium density residential plan unit development, and approval of a preliminary development plan for 303 South Hunter Street. I move for passage.
I second.
Along with condition upon the recommendations and the acceptance of the recommendations of staff.
I second.
Okay. I don't think there's any discussion. Let's go ahead and take the vote.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Yes.
Commissioner Preston,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiley,
Yes.
Commissioner McLean,
Yes.
Chairman Ashbaugh.
Yes. Case number 19-12503 has been approved. Good luck to you, sir. Thank you. You're welcome. All right. Just before we go to our next case, which is the UDO amendment on short-term rentals, had a few folks that came in and just want to say if you are thinking that you might want to say something tonight, that I would need to swear you in. So if you are, let's just go ahead but if you're not, then you can just sit there. So do you think you may or may not? That doesn't mean you have to. Do you want to take the opportunity? Huh? I just have questions. Well, if you have questions, you got to do the same thing. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this over with. Why don't you go ahead and stand up? Like I said, just because you do it doesn't mean you have to. All right? But you've got to if you're going to. So, do you solemnly swear to tell the whole truth before this commission? If so, please answer, I do. Okay, now you can take a seat. Okay, case number 19-175-04, UDO Development Ordinance Amendments. The staff has a report.
We do.
All right, lay it on us.
All right. The city adopted UDO Amendment 35 in November of 2018 to regulate short-term rentals for the first time. After initial short-term rental cases began to come forward, it was clear that additional restrictions were needed to address concerns of neighbors and this commission. The UDO Amendment number 40 would impose additional restrictions on short-term rentals in the city. The proposed changes address concerns raised by citizens at the August 13th Planning Commission meeting. Some of those concerns include density limits or maximum number of short-term rentals that are allowed in the city, the need for additional inspections, and limits on ownership. City Council also provided feedback following a study session presentation in September. With this amendment, staff has tried to strike a balance between concerns of the neighbors and those that feel that existing regulations are adequate. Finally, these changes are in line with other municipalities, both locally and nationally. This amendment would impose the following additional restrictions on short-term rentals. 1, limit the number of short-term rentals a single owner could operate to no more than 5. 2, limit the density of short-term rentals to no more than 1 per 8 structures on a block face as defined in this UDO amendment. And 3, require all short-term rentals to obtain a rental-ready inspection prior to their annual business license renewal, and this provision would begin in July of 2020. That concludes our report.
Thank you for the report. So, just to be clear, what's the next thing I should do?
The next thing is to open the public hearing and ask for any public comment for or against, and then you guys are, I guess if you had some questions now, that would be appropriate. Otherwise, if you wanted to open the public hearing, and then we can.
Well, I might, but this is the first time I didn't know there was something on the back. So I'm just looking at it right now. Do you have, before we open the public hearing, is there any questions from the commissioners?
Yes. The first citation, 14-420-06. How did we arrive at 5 as opposed to 4 or 6?
Staff just felt like 5 was a.
But why did they feel that way?
To be honest with you, we threw around numbers that were much lower, 2 or 3, and we felt that 5 sounded like a reasonable number that, you know, at this point we have no permits that would reach the number of 5. So we felt like that was a reasonable restriction that would sort of head off, you know, any future concerns about slum landlords or problem landlords related to short-term rentals. So, you know, we are always open to suggestions. If this commission prefers a smaller number, where, you know, you can always amend this before it goes to council. So.
Just for future changes, I just wanted to know the foundation for the 5. And since it's not so very scientific, we can probably entertain changing that number as necessary. Under 14-420-07, density limitations, 1 unit per structure. Am I to understand that if there's a duplex that is in existence presently and we're trying to get this taken care of, that investor simply shuts down the unit 2, or can they operate 2 short-term rentals in a single building? And if they can do 2, can they do 3?
Can I ask a question, just because it kind of pertains to this? 5 short-term rentals, is that 5 like separate units or 5 buildings that have units?
That would be 5 separate permitted units.
Okay, all right. So now that I'm clear on the number, for sure.
Okay, so our current ordinance limits short-term rentals to being in single-family homes or duplexes. Anything above a duplex is not eligible to have a short-term rental. So in the case that you suggested, if there was a duplex in a neighborhood and the owner wanted to do 2 short-term rentals, if they were the first people on that block to apply for short-term rentals, in theory, they could both be approved as short-term rentals. That would limit the density on that block. If there were not 16 homes or structures on that block, that would max out at that point. On the other hand, if they were permitted at one side of the duplex, they could always use that other side of a duplex as a long-term rental facility. It just, you know, if someone down the street on a 10-home block already had a short-term rental, there would only be one available to be permitted on that side of the street. Does that make sense?
So an owner-occupied building could possibly have 2 units, assuming that, of course, the structure supported that.
That's correct. As long as it's, you know, a duplex as defined in our ordinance, correct.
And how do we define a duplex?
That's true, Stuart pointed out. Not if they're owner occupied. Our ordinance also only allows for short-term rentals in empty structures, not currently occupied by the owner. So we don't allow people to rent out rooms in their home that they live in. We let them rent out.
Well, let's say you got a north wing.
According to our ordinance, no. If that's your primary residence, no. If you had a separate structure on that, potentially.
So not their basement either?
Not their basement either.
Okay. As my esteemed commissioner on to my right suggested, that maybe we make sure that we're actually saying what we mean. So like in the first one, you know, you said, well, they're separate, but it doesn't say that right now. And then in the second one that Billy was talking about, 07, it starts out with structures, and then at the bottom it says residential structures, right? So maybe it should it say residential structures? Because as we know,
that's the intent, residential
Okay.
structure. So if you would like us to insert residential structures, we can.
well, the reason I ask is because it's probably not too common, but there are, I'm sure, some places in town where there may be one commercial structure in the middle of a residential block. So does that count as a structure, or is
No,
it just
as
residential
that
structure?
last sentence indicates, we're only counting residential structures.
Okay.
So if you would like, we can.
Well, we just
we-
want to be
I mean,
on
that's, yeah, if it's clarification is what you need. Otherwise, if at the end, if you would like us to add that, we certainly can.
the devil's in the details. Right? So yes, I would suggest that. How about you guys? You want to say anything?
I don't see anything in here about landlords needing to live in Independence so that they could be easily gotten a hold of.
No, that's correct. However, our current ordinance does require that there be contact information on file with the city to either a local owner or a local property management company. So that's how our ordinance addresses that issue.
Okay.
Okay. We'll go ahead and open the public portion. If there's anyone here who agrees with this change in the UDO, if they'd come forward. Oh. You're going to speak for it, right? Yep. Okay, good checking. Please state your name and address for the record.
Margaret Paget, 11416 East 20th Street South, Independence.
Thank you, Margaret. Go ahead.
I own Three Trails Cottages LLC investment company. We have rental properties in town. We have some that are currently being readied for short-term rentals, and I have one that's been in use. I realize that this city needs to have ordinances and rules and regulations, and so I agree with everything that's been stated. I'm one of the good landlords, not a slumlord. And I don't believe that people involved in this business could be slumlords just because of the, we have to go through Airbnb and VRBO, and we have to be vetted, and we have our clients who come in to our properties, review us, and so these should be the best of the best in the city. I think it's a good move that the city has made because short-term rentals are everywhere. in every city. We expect it when we go somewhere and travel, we use them, and other people expect that when they come here. So I think it's a good thing that the city has done. I appreciate you addressing it and giving us an opportunity to make some money and stay in independence. I did want to bring one thing to your attention. There are currently commercial places such as apartment buildings and bed and breakfasts that are listed on the short-term rental sites, platforms. And so I'm just wondering, just have a question about that, since the regulations say that they cannot rent, is that going to change?
We'll certainly ask the question and get some sort of answer for you. And we won't close out. We'll, if that didn't help, when you get your answer, if that wasn't clear enough for you, let me know and we'll make sure, okay?
Okay.
But that'll come a little later.
Okay,
All
thank
right?
you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak in favor of this case, this amendment? Okay. Is there anyone else here who is either opposed to this or who has questions? Speak now. Because if I don't see anybody, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Yes, you do. That's the price of admission. So just relax, just say your name and your address, please.
Melissa Pedersen, 711 South Park Avenue, Independence.
Okay, and then make sure you're talking
Okay.
right in there. Thank you.
I was wondering if you could find these explanation of the ordinances online, or what we're talking about, or where, because we talked about the Airbnb in general in the August session, right? Is that what we're talking about now?
Yes, there's an amendment that they have, but we're talking about, there's a UDO, it's called a Unified Development Ordinance Amendment that's already on there, but we're talking about amending that, making it more specific or more so people can understand it. Can you access it online? Yes, you can. I'm not sure that the amendment hasn't been approved yet, so
the
part of it is.
previously approved UDO is
Yes.
available online on the city's website. This proposed amendment is also available on the agenda item for tonight's meeting as well.
Oh, okay.
Which is this piece of paper.
and
that's
then-
over there.
Okay.
Depending on what happens tonight, it will also go forward to the city council and it will be attached to that item as well.
Okay, so you talked about in your meeting all the Airbnbs being approved together or having a certain ordinance, so they were all, I don't know.
No, I
talked about.
think that each Airbnb still has to come forward to be
Okay.
approved. But during that process, we just came up with some other questions and we needed clarification, so that's what this is doing.
Okay.
So,
And then in another month's meeting, you'll go over each individual one.
well, we'll take them as they come. So it just depends on who's on the agenda for the night. And if you were previously on the agenda, I'm sure there'll come a time here when. Would you
So following council approval, if this is approved tonight and goes to council, at that point, we'll start bringing back those cases, probably one at a time, just to not overwhelm the process. So we don't really have a specific timeline, but we will be re-advertising all of those again. And so there'll be signs out in yards as there were the last time to notify you of the meeting. And again, those will be published on our agendas for these meetings as well.
Okay.
If I took a guess, would I say it would probably be after January?
I think that would be a fair bet.
Okay, so it's going to be a while. All right?
Okay.
All right, thank you. Unless you have any more questions?
I have a question about last month's, but
All right.
that doesn't pertain to this. Did the city voted on that issue? Is that results of that online, or is that not public yet?
On what?
The
Which specifically?
industrial building
Oh.
that's on Blue Park.
That's online. You can Google YouTube and find out kind of what's happened and watch
Okay.
the meetings if you're so
Okay.
inclined.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else who has questions? Okay, speak directly in the microphone, name and address, please.
Chuck Palmer, 700 South Fuller.
Thank you.
One of the questions I had posed back in August was, will there be any kind of requirements for a temporary Airbnb type of location to have on-site parking? Some of the neighborhoods have very tight streets already. So I'm wondering, is there requirements for parking built into the Airbnb licensing or approvals?
Okay, we'll find out about that too. Thank you. All right, is there anybody else here who's against or who has questions? Okay, public hearing portion is closed. Did you write down the questions and do you have answers?
I think I captured most of them, but if not, I'm sure we can figure that out.
Okay.
So as far as bed and breakfasts being listed on these short-term rentals, that absolutely is the case. And those bed and breakfasts have to go through a similar process here. They actually have to get a more rigorous special use permit through the Planning Commission. So the fact that they are on these short-term rental websites is fine with us. That's just how they choose to do it. They're already collecting the transient guest tax, so that's just another avenue for them. There's no, this is basically, sliding in under that special use permit. As far as if there's a home in a commercially zoned district, our current ordinance only applies to homes in residentially zoned districts. So we do have a case where there's homes along 23rd Street, for example, that are zoned commercial. If they chose to do a short-term rental, they could do that with a normal business license process and not have to come forward here. And I don't know if this was part of your question, but I just wanted to restate, as mentioned before, if it's a multi-unit apartment building, a short-term rental and Airbnb would not be allowed there. They're only allowed in single-family or duplex units. So if that, if it's a commercially zoned, apartment building, no short-term rental would be allowed there. So I think that captures the initial questions. And then on parking for short-term rentals, so our ordinance requires at least one off-street parking, which is in line with our normal code. And then credit can be given for street frontage for on-street parking. As staff, that's something that we know is going to be an issue when these come up. So we're going to be looking for, if you say you're going to have 4 rooms, you have to show that you've got adequate parking and that you're not going to have 5 cars. And that's something that we would note in a staff report to you to say, hey, this applicant probably needs to look at expanding the driveway or making some other provisions for parking, because we understand that'll have impacts on vehicular or pedestrian traffic in the neighborhood.
If they're looking to expand the driveway, okay, isn't there some type of building code that applies to how big your driveway could be? In other words, could it be the entire front of your house?
Yeah, they would have to obviously comply with any kind of building codes requirements. If they had a gravel driveway, they couldn't add to the gravel driveway. They would have to, pave that with concrete, those types of restrictions. I don't know if you guys remember the first short-term rental that we heard. They had that sort of gravel pull-off, and one of the staff's recommendations was to improve that in order to provide additional off-street parking, because we were concerned about the limited driveway space that they had. So that's a case where we would recommend that they make improvements to provide that off-street parking, just as an example.
Okay, and that just approves to that wouldn't apply to the back of the building, or would it just apply to the front of the building? Aha.
Well,
I'm not sure what you're asking, but I think it's the parking in the front is 40% of the front yard
Sure.
can be used for parking. In the back, there's not really a percentage of the backyard that is parking is limited to.
Well, so say they wanted to provide parking in the back, and all right, so they have like room for 5 cars in the back. Does that have to be in a garage? Can it be open? Does it need to be fenced? If it's not fenced, does it be screened?
It can be open, it just has to be paved.
Okay, so it
You
can
don't
be
want to
open
make
and
it to
paved.
look too much like a commercial property. So you don't need to fence in a parking lot,
Well,
if that's what your question.
I go to a lot of homes, and I haven't seen too many that have 5, 6 cars in the back that are at least wanting landscape, so I don't, I'm just asking that if that were to happen, they could do
again,
that.
we would make sure, we would.
Or you
in
would
our-
tell us, and then we get to decide whether they can do it.
Exactly. And in our conditions, we would stipulate, it has to be built in conformance with city code. I will say, if we ran into an issue where there was really inadequate parking, we could also make a recommendation in our staff report that they not try to license all 5 bedrooms that maybe they were allowed to. Maybe it was, they limited it to 3 bedrooms in order to reduce that traffic potential at the unit. So there are ways we can address this, and going forward, those are all things that we will be including in our staff report to help you guys evaluate, what impact it will have on the neighborhood.
Okay.
That feels better to me, especially the answer for the parking, to know that you guys have thought about it and are thinking about it. I think, if I remember correctly, under the Airbnb and the VRBO, their requirements are so strict for parking. So I think anybody who's on that platform, the city's in great shape. So I think cities that have taken the steps to kind of at least come upon par with those platforms, it gives everybody a better chance and protects the Airbnbs who are doing a great job and are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I think this looks pretty good.
Yeah, I think this is better.
Just one minor correction at 14-420-08-C. Final line. I think that was meant to say no older than. Or we could read not older than.
Noted.
Okay.
Could you expound on what a rental-ready inspection is?
Let me turn this on. Hold on, let me find my, I knew this question would come up. Yeah, so just for everyone's benefit, Rental Ready is the program that the city instituted several years ago for interior inspections of long-term rentals. We found this could be an opportunity to also subject these rentals, short-term rentals, to similar internal inspections, and I can give you an idea of what they look for during these inspections. That the property address is visible from the outside, no exposed electrical wires are present, all smoke detectors are in proper working order, all handrails are secure and functioning in the home. The unit shall have working sanitary systems. Carbon monoxide detectors must be on all units. Unobstructed means of egress must be present to get to the exterior. GFCI are required on all electrical outlets within 6 feet of a water source, and all furnaces, water heaters, and other equipment are properly installed and maintained. So this does go above and beyond those inspections that are handled by the fire department, which are very similar to business license inspections where they look for, a map of egress from the building and fire extinguishers and things like that. So this does go above and beyond, getting into a little more of the mechanical and the safety issues. So we felt like this was kind of a good mesh to address some of those things without potentially subjecting short-term rentals to the same inspections that hotels or larger inns might have to go through.
And I'm sorry if I missed it, but who did you say performed these? The fire department?
So no, rental ready inspections are actually performed by third-party contractors. The city put out an RFP several years ago and has 3 to 5 contractors. And these inspections happen every 2 years. So a property owner has to get an inspection of their rental property, and then that inspection is good for 2 years. So when they renew on the second year, they can just show that they got their inspection a year ago and they're good for another year. So the way we envision this is the same way. On renewal of their business license, for the first year they would get this rental ready inspection. It would be good for 2 years. After that 2 years, they would need another inspection.
And does their cost for their license cover the cost of that, or is that something the city's just providing and paying
No,
for?
these inspections cost $50, and that's the same with long-term rentals as well.
But it does not include health like checking for bugs and bed bugs?
No, that's correct. It's more these life safety things.
So I just want to make sure I understand you. It's $50. Are they paying for it, or is the city paying for it?
Oh, sorry. No, the homeowner, the business owner is paying for it.
And
And
then-
that's good for 2 years, so it's basically a $25 a year cost.
Okay, and how much is a typical business license? Is it based on revenue?
Yeah,
'Cause like
it
mine-
depends on the gross receipts. I believe is it $75 flat fee, and then there's a
So
calculation.
it's the same as any other business?
Yeah.
Okay. And so that ready rental cost isn't tacked on there?
It's in addition. It's on top of the business license fee.
Okay. Do you have a burning question or comment? If you do, you have to come up to the microphone, please. And make sure you speak right into it, because Stuart will get upset with you.
Our cost for a short-term rental license was $350.
Oh, yeah, that's the application fee.
The application fee.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So on the rental ready thing, I might have missed it, but what is the fire component inspection part? Is there a second exit required, or fire extinguishers, or smoke
Just
detectors?
specifically the unobstructed means of egress from the interior. Is that what you're talking? Or the fire inspection? Is that what?
Like,
So just in general for our business license and our home-based business, the fire department performs inspections once they make application to the city. And yeah, those are things like fire extinguishers. If it's a commercial building, they're looking for exit signs and, things like that.
but do some of those apply to this rental ready?
Not to
No.
rent ready, but they already apply previously
Okay.
to any business in
I
the
see.
city.
Okay, I get it. Okay.
Okay, so my question is, I'm sure everybody's going to be good owners, but if they're not, what do you do? Where's the teeth in this? Where's the enforcement?
So the existing ordinance allows, as for any business, if there are any violations of the ordinance as laid out or property maintenance code violations, those are all grounds for an administrative hearing with the property where that business license could be revoked. And according to this ordinance, if your business license is revoked after receiving a permit for a short-term rental, that approval is also revoked. And if they wanted to do that again, they'd have to come back for, approval again.
Okay, and that's if that's either an annual thing that happens, or if something
So that would be on
unusual
by a
happens.
complaint basis, if
I got you.
neighbors are complaining, or if we, police get calls, if we in community development got calls that, this short-term rental has been, chronically noisy and bothering the neighbors, or parking is an issue, or they're running the short-term rental here, but there's, unmowed grass is too tall and all these property maintenance code violations. Those are things that would prompt us to, look at that business license and potentially hold a hearing where we would obviously give them an opportunity to make corrections, but if not, then that business license could be revoked, as with any business license.
Okay. I think all these are good. There was one other thing which I doubt that you'll want to do, but I would like to read something from a website that talks about how different cities have handled this. And one has pretty successful besides New Orleans is Chicago. In Chicago, according to this, Chicago has been innovative in its enforcement. Rather than hosts applying for their license directly to the city, Chicago passes the onus on to Airbnb and other, rental intermediaries. In other words, people that are legit. This means the city will not take direct requests from hosts for their license. License will only be issued from the city to a host when Airbnb has requested the license on behalf of the host, which can take care of a lot of problems. Not that we're anticipating that, but but maybe we should anticipate it. So I'm just putting it out there. Could you guys talk about that, please?
We can talk about it, sure.
Okay. I can email you this stuff if you would like to see it.
Yeah, that would be great.
All right, thank you. I just thought that was kind of an innovative way of going about it. Because right now it seems like anybody who can qualify can go ahead and do it and then, you know, do whatever nefarious thing they want to do and wait till they get caught. So anyway, and I don't think that's going to be a big problem, but, you know, an ounce of prevention sometimes worth a pound of cure. Okay. And commissioners have any other comments, questions, motions?
I do think that one's not a bad one to have in your back pocket. Seems like cities have a lot of trouble with this. That seems so easy, because all the research I did was kind of the same thing. They went back and back and back and back for all kinds of various reasons, so that was not a bad one. I mean, Airbnb's got it going on. We want to amend, do we want to add separate into that 14.420.06?
I think so, separate, and then
Short-term rentals?
and then on the 07, just keep saying residential structures. The first sentence just says structures. Just, sorry, a little more ink to use. So.
So you want residential in before structures?
Yeah.
You think?
Yeah.
Anybody care?
No, that's good.
Anything else?
And then the last one, that bill, rather than, right? Is that what you think?
That's just a typo we can fix without an amendment, but
I'll let
sure.
you, then
Yeah.
I'll let you do that one. It's so much easier.
Now, don't get sensitive.
Don't point it out then.
Okay.
Take a red pencil
Trying to
to
keep
you.
it clean for you.
Separate.
No more than.
All right.
Okay.
You got it?
We ready?
Yes.
Well, let's have a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
in the matter of case number 19-175-04, UDO amend number 40, short-term rentals, I move for adoption pursuant to the recommended changes.
I second.
Okay, we have a second. I believe we're ready to take a vote here.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Yes.
Commissioner Preston,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiley,
Yes.
Commissioner McLean,
Yes.
Chairman Ashbaugh.
Yes.
That wasn't nearly as painful as we thought.
19-175-04, UDO Amendment Number 40, short-term rental restrictions has been approved. The next item on our agenda is approval of minutes. Did anybody notice any misspellings and stuff like that? Or I didn't. I thought it was perfect. Okay.
I was
Yeah, it
impressed
was.
that you got it all.
It was. I got tired just reading it.
Flashbacks.
Flashback and trauma-induced, trauma-informed, whatever. So, yeah, thank you for doing that. The minutes will stand approved as written. Do any of the commissioners have questions of staff or comments for staff?
I just want to go on record, the amount of work that you did to bring this short-term rental to fruition that this commission could act on. It's just a stellar piece of work.
Thank you.
Good job.
I do appreciate that. But obviously, as with anything, it's a work in progress, so we can always make changes as we go forward. So
Okay.
thank you.
I did have one thing I'd like to see if you guys can do, and maybe
No.
a lot of times we get these cases and we vote and we say yes or no. But I was wondering if there's anywhere on the actual report that we get that could say if we approve, it goes to council at this date, or if we deny it, it doesn't, or because some things you know, I mean, we're not here enough to learn the whole thing, right? So could you tell us what our actions will do, what it does after it leaves us?
Yeah, would you like that on the staff report?
Yeah, somewhere on
Yeah.
the staff report,
We
if we,
can-
you know, if we approve or disapprove or.
Yep, we can make those modifications. That would be fine.
Okay, that would be very helpful. I appreciate that. Any? Were you going to introduce our new member?
I was actually going to let him introduce himself because, you know,
Unless he's changed his
I
mind.
literally met him 45 minutes ago. So if you wouldn't mind coming up, we actually have 2 new members. They got appointed last night. One of them is here tonight, and I'll let him introduce himself, and we'll get him on board and ready for our meeting next month.
I am Richard Dreher of 22801 East 28 Terrace Court, Blue Springs, but it is Independence.
Okay.
So I'm happy to be on the board now. So
Well, we'll see if you're just as happy after you've been on here for a
after
while.
that last meeting, I don't know.
Yeah. Most of the time, it's a good group. Most of the time, we have good meetings. There's a few long ones. So, but welcome.
Yeah, I'm looking
and-
forward to it though.
Yeah, thank you very much. Welcome.
Thanks.
I'm not going to ask him. Find out. Okay. Unless there's anything else, we stand adjourned at 6:56 p.m.